not joined us before, this is a pop culture podcast where we talk about everything ranging from comic books, the movies, the music, television, and everything in between.
We do indeed.
Yeah. And we do it with a transatlantic flair.
We do it with aplomb. That's a word.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And a fruit.
Now.
I am one of your hosts.
Stop talking about your plums.
I'm wearing tidy whities and I'm smuggling plums. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Cadotte, and with me, as always, is the lovable, the abdominable Owen Adams.
The abdominable.
Say hi, Owen Adams.
Is that, hello? Is that, like, related to the abdomen?
I don't know, maybe.
The abdominable snowman? He's a Yeti, but he's ripped.
Yes. My host is a living muscle, just located just beneath the rib cage.
I'm Batman's 9th ab.
Callback.
Yeah. Well, you gotta do a callback every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit of slow stuff for me. I have been so out of it this week that I am.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Majorly tired today. I actually fell asleep earlier today watching. Have you ever seen that film, The Black Hole?
Like the early 1980s Disney film?
Right. I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking about it for the first time in years. And I was telling Beth about it, and I was like, oh, you should see it. It's like Disney attempting to make a Star Wars film, right? Which is kind of what it was like, you know, a little bit. It was clearly very Star Wars inspired. And then we were shopping, and I saw it on DVD, really cheap, like a really cheap old copy. Well, not old, but like a cheap, you know, early printing with a crappy cover. And I'm like, we should watch it, because, you know, you like Disney films, Beth. It's a Disney film you've never seen. We should watch it. 40 minutes in.
It's hardly a typical Disney film.
40 minutes in, she's like, do we really have to watch all of this? And I've fallen asleep. I'm like, no, it was so boring. I hadn't seen it in a long time.
Snap out of your slumber. Yes, goddammit.
Yeah, you'll watch it while I sleep. Yeah, it's a really bad film, so I watched that today. It's even worse than I remember. It's got Anthony Perkins in, you know, from Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell that the whole time he's thinking, I was in Psycho.
Yeah. I was Norman Bates.
Right, like and I can do it again. I wouldn't hurt a fly.
Right here, right now.
It's a really weird film. Like, it clearly feels like it wants to be 2001: A Space Odyssey, if you know what I mean. But the script isn't that smart. And Star Wars had come out 2 years earlier. So it has one set of robots that look like stormtroopers and another set of robots that look a bit like R2-D2. And so it's like this really moody, very talky, heavy dialogue thing. At one point, an engineer sees a black hole and he's like, it's right out of Dante's Inferno. Every character talks like this. And then there's a damaged, floating R2-D2 style robot voiced by Slim Pickens that floats around going, I'm Bob!
It's like if they had just like inserted like Barney into Apocalypse Now.
I would love that. Corporal Barney,
I love you. God.
Corporal Barney, you'll be leading the first assault. Oh, jeez.
I love the smell of fresh baked cookies and napalm in the morning.
I love you, you little bad birds. Get enough.
ever seen that video of I think it was like a mall signing or something like that? Because I don't know if they do it over there, but over here, every once in a while, they'll get someone like dressed up like Barney or Big Bird or some shit like that, and then they go to a mall and like they sign autographs and meet kids and they're like, "Oh, it's Barney, everyone!"
Right.
And there's a video online, and for the life of me, I always have the hardest time finding it. But apparently the Barney costume has like a small like air conditioning unit like installed into it. And I guess the thing malfunctioned and started on fire.
So the kids got to see Barney burning from the inside.
Self-immolating.
Spontaneous dinosaur combustion.
Just halfway through his spiel, he was like, just halfway through, it's like, all right, everyone, we're gonna sing the ABC song. You know what? Fuck this. Vietnam's an atrocity.
My hip is burning from the bone inside out. Well, someone once told a story in an interview. Do you guys like? It's a British cereal, I think. Sugar Puffs. Sugar Puffs. I don't know why I said it like that. Sugar Puffs, right?
Puffs.
But they have a mascot called the Honey Monster, and he's that type of thing, right? He's just a big monster covered in like golden yellow fur, right? But he's a similar kind of costume, right? And when they first introduced the Honey Monster, they used to take him touring like shopping centers and things like that, you know. And I saw an interview with a guy once saying that a kid stabbed the Honey Monster. And the guy inside was fine because he was, you know, there's layers upon layers of fluff in those things. But yeah, a guy tried to stab the Honey Monster, which is a terrifying image.
Well, it's like there's like hundreds of videos though of like guys dressed up as like Chuck E. Cheese, just getting like smoked in the nuts by kids.
Well, I mean, even as an adult, it's tempting.
Oh right, you know. Because they all come up to you. It's like, did you use your tokens today? I swear to God, Chucky, I'm gonna fuck you right in the goddamn mouse nuts. All right,
you're on a thin line here, children's entertainer.
Like, there's just screaming kids all around me. I'm terrified that my child's gonna find a syringe in the ball pit. Just back the fuck off, mouse. Just back the fuck off.
This is the story of how Five Nights at Freddy's began, isn't it? Really. Like, we switched to robots because the costume characters kept getting murdered in their sleep.
Well, it's like the creator of Five Nights at Freddy like went there with his kids. Like, all right, guys, third birthday. Yeah, we're all having a good time. He's sitting there trying to eat that craptastic pizza, and then then the guy in the suit's like comes over. Hey, how's it going? Like knocks over a soda onto the guy. He's like, fuck it, I'm never coming here again. This is a horror show.
The glass slowly goes to the ground. Then it shatters.
Pupils dilate.
Yeah, close up on the eye, you know. But as you see, then it just cuts back to like an oversaturated, grainy, like 8mm footage of a cartoon character just like wiggling in his face, like boop 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 boop. And close up to his face again, and his eyes are just getting more and more white. Boop 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 boop.
No, it's like, can you tell us the impetus of what made you create Five Nights at Freddy's? I remember it like it's yesterday. Just smash cuts to like, look, I know he doesn't have enough tokens for it, but can I just buy it? I just want to buy the fucking thing. All right, I will pay you real money for the doll. Sorry, sir, he needs 10,000 tickets, and it's like, look, no one gets 10,000. Work with me, buddy. You're making minimum wage. Fuck. Rules are rules, sir, and here at Chuck E. Cheese, we believe. Shut up! Just shut up!
See, while we're on the subject of Barney, I feel obliged to mention something, right? Which is that for all they tried to educate the kids about, like, basic maths, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They fucked up some real fundamental issues about biology. Because, like,
Because dinosaurs are feathers now. Haven't you heard?
No, it's not that. No, I can deal with that, right? But
I can handle the purple dinosaur.
I am certain they said. Yeah, okay. They did say this, right? They're supposed to be Barney's, like, siblings, right? Those other dinosaurs?
Are they? I thought they're just friends.
Well, okay. Maybe not Barney's siblings, but the two little ones were definitely brother and sister, right? So why are they different types of dinosaur?
Maybe one's adopted, you insensitive prick.
It was the olden days. They didn't do that in the dinosaur
90s?
times. No, in the dinosaur times when dinosaurs were.
Yes, we had the Spice Girls, Jinko Jeans, but we hadn't figured out adoption yet.
I maintain this is nonsense. I
maintain you're ruining my shtick. Okay, I'm the one who's supposed to have unnecessary rants and problems with things. All right.
I want to see the episode.
Don't take that away from me, Owen.
I want to see the episode of Barney the dinosaur where one of the kids like grazes their knee, and they're like, "Oh, take it to Barney. He'll know what to do."
He just loses it in blood rage.
Right, and then he sniffs. He's like, "Is that human blood?" Yeah, the pupils dilate. The spikes reemerge down this palm, down the spine. He goes like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, you know. By the end, all the kids are hiding in the little, you know, those little plastic cars that they push children around shopping centers in. They're all crammed into one of those while Barney rams up against the side.
Comes to the roof.
A kid that looks eerily like Jeff Goldblum's going, come on, we gotta move. Turn the light off.
Yeah, the one kid in the leather jacket grabs a birthday candle. Come here! Come get me!
Come on! Do you think there was ever a time in...
Life finds a way.
Ever a time in Barney where they were like, oh, we're gonna play... did you ever play that game Grandmother's Footsteps where, like, one kid turns around and the others have to walk closer to them, but when the kid has to turn around at random intervals and everyone has to freeze? Did they ever play that? Yeah. And everybody freezes and Buddy goes, where did you all go? Where? I'm alone! Everyone is... Everyone I know has left me.
Why does everyone leave? Why does everyone always leave me? No, Barney, we're right here. Ha ha, gotcha. Did you ever read the Jurassic Park or the Lost World?
The books, yeah. The original, the Michael Crichton ones. Yeah, I think they're both pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Lost World? There's a great scene where they address the whole standing still thing.
I don't.
So there's a great scene where, in the book, The Lost World, it's kind of the same premise except they don't have the whole San Diego bit in it.
Yeah, the Lost World book is more different to the Lost World film than the Jurassic Park book is, I think.
Yes and no.
But yeah.
Ian's still in it.
The characters are quite different. Ian still being in it's quite funny because he actually dies in the first Jurassic Park book. So they write in a scene... Yeah, so they write in a scene where... But they knew he was going to be in the next film before he wrote the book. Mm-hmm. So they write in a scene where he goes to a conference and basically does the Mark Twain line, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated.
Right.
Even though we had a scene in the book that was like, Ian is dead.
But it's kind of still the same, though, because Ian and then there's mercenaries who are trying to steal eggs and bring them back.
Yeah.
Honestly, funny enough, Jurassic Park 3, I think, follows closer to the plot of Lost World, the book.
Right. It's a terrible film.
Because, yeah. But there's a great scene where some of these mercenaries are confronted by a T-Rex. and they all just stand perfectly still. And Ian and his team are watching this all on cameras, and they're like, what are they doing? And he goes, acting on wrong information. And then they go on to explain that Grant's theory about T-Rexes not being able to see is like wrong, because he based it on the fact that their ocular cavity is similar to frogs, and frogs can't see. They go to a long way to explain that as bullshit, and then the mercenaries just get eaten.
It's pretty funny. Where they never really address that in the movie, though. They never go back on that one. They
No.
They stick to that.
Yeah, they hang true to that.
Which is funny, because if you watch that first film, I know they say, don't move, it can't see you if you don't move, but that never comes up in that film as a manner for escaping the T-Rex. They just say it,
Yeah.
So you could correct that without creating a continuity error,
It's almost more... I think it's more used to explain why the T-Rex chooses to go after...
Right.
Chooses to leave the kids alone and go after Ian.
Right, but he's also, waving a flare and shouting, which would do it.
Right. Yeah. Just out of annoyance. This motherfucker over here.
Is the T-Rex sitting going, I'm gonna get to you. Hold on.
Yeah. Be patient. You will be eaten in the order that I get to you in.
Right. And it doesn't work as that great an excuse, because they're still moving in the car, because that's why he gets out. The kids are still moving. I really like Jurassic Park,
Yeah. Me too.
I
still haven't seen Jurassic World, though.
It's not good.
No?
No, it's
Oh, that's right. You didn't like it. I remember that.
It had a really good trailer, I thought. I thought the trailer was really promising. There is a really nice moment when, all the way through the film, they never say the words Jurassic Park. They're really careful not to say it. There's a really nice moment where they go through into the control room where they're operating everything, and there's a computer operator, a bit like a Nedry type character, and he's wearing a Jurassic Park t-shirt and cap. The operator's like, that's really insensitive. Go on, take that t-shirt off. We're not having that. So there's a sense that the Jurassic Park branding has become this really taboo thing,
Right.
And then you're like, but why did they then call the park Jurassic World with the same logo, just in blue?
Right.
It would be like if they went, no, this is Mackie Mouse with the two circles and the big circle. But no, it's pretty good in some respects, in visuals and that trailer, but when you actually get into the plot, it's a mess. Like most films these days.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of messes, I injured myself the other day.
So the way you chose to phrase that makes it sound like you injured yourself doing something sexual.
Not quite.
Damn it.
Not quite.
Come on, we're supposed to be spicing up the show, John.
Well, I was out drinking. And in my head, I was hoping that perhaps the night could end sexually. It did not.
Did it?
No.
No. I'm sad for you, John.
I'm out drinking, and it's Memorial Day weekend here, and
did you memorialize?
Yes.
It's funny because I'd like to think that you were out drinking, you were hoping it would end in picking someone up, but you were also thinking of dead soldiers. I think that's a good combination.
Well, what better way to memorialize fallen soldiers than just having meaningless sex? I mean, it's what the founding fathers wanted.
When we become big enough on the show that we're selling t-shirts, that's going to be the first one. Followed by an alternative. What better way to memorialize fallen soldiers than by buying this t-shirt?
Oh, man.
And then bigger than that whole quote, it's going to have your name. little hyphen.
Jonathan Cadotte says.
And a picture of you doing that, like the Dogma Buddy Christ pose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just dressed like Scumbag Steve.
Right.
But no, I went out, and it's kind of a big weekend here. In this.
Scott and Chet says, "Thank you for your quote marks service."
Well played, sir. But because I live in a small town, but it's actually kind of a tourist town. There's a lot of like natural tourism here. A lot of like rivers and lakes and campgrounds.
Okay.
And things like that. Parks, ATV trails. So it's kind of a destination for these sort of weekends. Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, 4th of July. Just those kind of summer holidays where people get an extra day off.
Right.
And so I decided to go out the other night because, well, it's packed. There's a lot of people, and it's usually kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go out, and by the end of the night, it's bar time. The lights are on, and everyone's kind of scrambling for the doors. I get invited to go to this after bar, or after party. And like, yeah, sure, let's go. And like, yeah, we got a driver, we got everything. Let's go. Like, yeah, all right, I'll go. And so this is SUV, and I didn't have anyone to tell me this, but I just know all the other SUV commercials I've seen that somewhere someone has said about this SUV, it seats 8, which is bullshit. All right, it does not seat 8. It seats 2 adults comfortably and maybe 4 children, or alternatively, 2 adults comfortably and a bunch of people who have their legs cut off comfortably.
Right.
Right. So I'm trying to crawl into this SUV, and I drew this short straw, so I have to sit in the very far back. So I'm crawling in, and we can't even get the seat in front of me to fold back. There's just no room. So the person who's sitting in front of me, this girl, goes, well, I'll just sit on the folded seat and I'll use Jonathan's legs as the backrest. I was like, okay, that's fine.
Still hoping for that. Still hoping for that end to the evening.
Right. So she's doing that, and she's not heavy or anything, so it doesn't. That does hurt. We get to the after party, and she climbs out, but when she does, she puts her hand on my knee as if it was an actual piece of furniture, and then pushes herself off. Now the problem is that my foot is wedged underneath the seat in front of me, so which keeps my shin as stationary as it possibly can. And she pushes on my knee, and all I feel is just this sharp pain go through my leg.
Nice.
And I have not been able to twist my leg or walk sideways since. I can only walk forward.
So your crab impression's fucked. How?
Seriously.
How will I walk like a crab now?
You would be surprised how much you need that lateral motion in your day-to-day life once you can't.
Sir, you will be surprised how rarely I get up off the couch.
But seriously, like, just going about the house, I look like a fucking Resident Evil character. Like Resident Evil 1. I have to, like, stop, turn.
You're telling me you now have tank controls?
Yeah.
It's terrific.
I have to independently move both my left and right legs.
Do you also have to ask yourself a prompt every time you want to use the key in the door? have your keys
For some
all been...
reason, I now have, like... My house is now filled with crests,
and
cranks,
typewriters.
and typewriters.
And every time
Every
you
time
use
I want to sleep now, it's...
every time you lock or
I'm gonna
unlock
hit
your
the
door,
hay.
your key breaks. You have to go get a new one.
Dogs jumping through my fucking windows. Not dogs, but like little Pomeranians. They're just like... They don't even make it through the window. It's just...
Well, there's another dog.
Oh god, that'd be fucking hilarious if they just do a reboot of Resident Evil and they replace all the dogs with like little toy dogs, you know, those like little Pomeranians or Chihuahuas or something.
Oh, I'd love that.
And
Yorkshire Terriers.
They just keep slamming into the window to not big enough to actually break through
All the
it.
time. Never like a shock. Whenever you're outside, just boop. Ow. And instead, when you're walking through the nighttime, instead of like the ow, all you can hear is
Yeah. Little yippy little fuckers. Like,
yeah.
God, just shoot them out of principle.
No, that'd be great. I would play that Resident Evil every day.
I hate those little dogs. I fucking can't stand them.
Why is it that, like, it must be some fluke of genetics, right? That the dogs that are least scared of strangers are the ones you could easily kick.
Right? like these big, like, giant mastiffs, you know, they're always kind of, like, real timid and shit. Like, oh, hey.
Right.
Hi, human.
Yeah, just
but, like,
trotting
these
around.
But yeah, like these little tiny little fuckers, you know, who you can... I have a theory that, like, if I can pick up a dog and throw it like an American football a good 15 yards, like if someone can run a button hook pattern and I can nail them on the first down, like, that's not a dog, right? It's just not.
Right. And you just know that it has happened that someone's given one a good punt, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's happened. There's always a great story Stephen Fry tells about how he went to his a friend's house one time, and he went up to use the bathroom, and on the landing there was a little plastic ball. Without thinking, he just kicked it like a football in the back garden. Oh, and then they have tea. And about half an hour later, says, "I can't find the hamster anywhere."
It's actually eerily similar.
Your mic is breaking up a little bit every now and then. It's not continuous, but it is breaking up a little bit. Are you possibly a little far? Are you on the wireless headset?
No, I'm using my blue.
It might be me then. Might be my connection. Or your connection. Who knows? It could be anyone's connection.
Who knows?
We'll run with it. It'll be okay.
We'll go with it. So, my friend has had a party, and everyone's been drinking, everyone's been smoking a little bit, and the host of the party has a little white dog, a little white puffball dog.
Right.
And they're perfectly, like, cool, like, kind of like tossing this dog back and forth. The dog's loving it. You know, he loves being picked up and, like, lightly tossed, and someone catches him, and he's having a good time with it, right? Well, my friend is so out of it at this point that they toss the dog towards him, and in the brief moment that the dog's in the air, he sees it, and his brain doesn't register dog, it registers volleyball.
No.
So he just spiked that sucker into the floor, and the dog goes whimpering off, and everyone's looking at him. They're like, "You asshole!" And he responds with, "Who has a fluffy volleyball?"
It's pretty funny.
So So what you been up to, man?
Not much. Your voice is now very muffled. I wonder if this is a connection issue.
I think it might be.
All right, well, we'll try and write it out. If people are hearing a little bit of iffy sound, I do apologize. Not much. I have finished most of the story content on Destiny now, which is pretty good. I've been playing that on the channel for a little while. And I finished Rise of Iron today, the main story stuff. Once you get to the later expansions, they start adding a lot more side quests and things. But yeah, I've gone through that, and that has been quite an experience, actually. I have really enjoyed going through Destiny. I think it's actually become probably one of my favorite games. As long-time listeners to the podcast will no doubt enjoy. Rise of Iron is actually a really interesting expansion because it's fairly story-focused, and it adds a new social area. And that social area is set on Earth. In fact, most of the missions are set on Earth. And it does something that a lot of the other Destiny expansions do, which is none of them particularly add new content in terms of visuals. What they tend to do is Taken King, for example, adds a whole new class of villains, but it's existing monsters with a filter, you know? And this kind of does the same thing. It creates a new enemy that is corrupted versions of existing characters. Existing enemy classes. But the story it tells is kind of cool. It tells the story of before we had the Guardians, there were these proto-Guardians called the Iron Lords, and they locked away a secret in the past. And so it's pretty short. It's a pretty short quest through about 5 missions that culminate in a new weapon and new gear. And Destiny, I think, they always focus on new loot, you know? They even when they're adding story content, you know, the ultimate idea is to build your character up with new gear.
Right, I mean, because at the end of the day, Destiny has become, and I imagine it's going to keep doing this going forward just by looking at some of the promotional stuff they've done. It has become a loot cycle game.
Right. And, you know, that's when it works best as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mind that. I think Destiny 2 is going to go fully open world. I could be wrong.
I don't know. I think what we're going to have is more of those social areas. I think you'll probably get, like, how I imagine, because they're getting rid of the orbit, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to
go to
orbit
orbit
anymore. Which is great.
Right, because it is just an extra step. Like, you could just have
it's completely unnecessary.
You could just have a choose destination thing instead of going to orbit. Even if you have the loading screens.
The only thing nice about the orbit was, like, when you and your buddies are playing together and you see all you guys' ships, you know, floating together.
Right.
And it does give you a nice little sense of team,
but you'd still get that with a loading screen.
It's superfluous. Yeah. So what I think you're going to end up having is my guess is, and maybe this has already been proven false, but my guess is that every planet is going to have its own little social area.
Yeah. I think that would be a good idea. I think what I'd like to see, when people ask me about changes to Destiny, I think the changes I would like to see most is, I would like, if you look at Destiny 1, those planets are full open areas, right? If you do a patrol, you can usually get to every area you can get to in most missions, right? Except for mission areas that get added in expansions. Like Rise of Iron presents a lot of areas that are areas you've been to before but are changed cosmetically. But if you go and open up a patrol in, say, the Cosmodrome, which is the Earth area, you can get to everywhere you would get in a mission set in that area, you know? Through the patrol.
Right.
I would like...
Well, you know, it's kind of weird. It is a big open area, for the most part, but it is actually kind of blocked off.
Yeah, it's not a very big open area. They're usually very linear, except for I think Mars.
There's usually like three or four little open areas where enemies kind of spawn in.
Right, and then there'll be buildings between them that will form.
Right, and like winding paths that you have to take, canyons and shit.
Right, and so
which are empty.
You end up in this weird place. Right, and when you do a mission, it'll always spawn you at the end of a winding path, so you can ride your sparrow for a little bit,
right.
for no reason. But then what that creates is it creates this odd thing where you're like, what are the patrols really for? Because sometimes it'll set you as a patrol as a mission, and you're like, okay, fair enough. And you can run around in the patrols and kill time and kill enemies. At low levels, that can be a little useful for grinding, but they are kind of weird because I think the existence of the patrols speaks to an earlier version of Destiny where it would feel a little bit more like an open world game.
Right.
Because they sit oddly in the game.
Because I don't know if they still exist, but when Destiny first started, they would have these social events that would happen. And as you were running around in the patrols, shit would happen. Like
right,
the sky
random
would turn
occurrences.
color a little.
Yeah,
yeah,
and
like
enemies will drop, or
turn...
you'll have to fight a spaceship landing troops in and things. Yeah.
Well, not even so much that, but there would be actual objectives that would pop up.
Yeah, those still happen, and they only happen in the patrols. But it's a bit weird to go to the patrol just in hopes of a random thing happening when there isn't that much of value other than the thing. So what I'd like to see in Destiny 2 is, rather than patrols and missions that all take place in the same areas, I'd really like to see you be able to start a mission from a patrol. That's the bit in Destiny that doesn't make any sense to me. If I'm doing a patrol in the Cosmodrome and I have a mission that starts at that point in the patrol and it's on my quest list and it's unlocked, why can't I just dick around and patrol for a bit and then go start a mission in that area, because patrols at the current state, they're these weird, half-open, meaningless worlds,
Right. I think in lieu of that, I think I would prefer that if the missions themselves weren't as linear.
Yeah.
So instead of just having a patrol to wander around and dick around in, just make it so that the missions themselves involve multiple paths or just wider areas.
I will tell you my favorite thing about the DLC for Destiny. There are much less missions that are stand here while Ghost hacks this thing and fight off waves of troops.
Right.
Because if there's one thing that the main Destiny campaign gets wrong, it's that. That comes up so often that it's silly by the end of the game. You're like, oh, am I hacking while he opens a door again? Fair enough.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I think they even joke about it too at a certain point. Like it becomes almost like a self-referential thing.
It is kind of funny, Destiny, and because in some respects, and I totally see why its initial reputation was so lackluster, because in some respects it's almost absurdly bad, and that sounds very harsh, but there are just some things when you're playing it that you're like, really? They did this? And it's like, why? You don't get it. And yet the core gameplay loop is so good. Like, for me, I mostly play streaming at the moment, so I'm mostly trying to clear new content, but when I'm playing on my own, what I'll do is I'll put on a Strikes playlist, or Crucible, or something where I can earn some loot, and I'll sit, and I'll play, and I'll kill some things, and I won't pay that much attention to the story, and then I'll go get my engrams, and I'll head back to the tower. I'll make sure I've got all my best gear equipped, so I'm getting my best engrams, see what I've got, and then go back and do it again, and infuse my weapons and upgrade. That fundamental bit of gameplay is so good that it doesn't really feel like anything else. Because it's not really like Borderlands either,
See, Destiny is such a weird thing, because it is almost miraculous that it survived.
Yeah.
Because it was on such a razor's edge when it came to Is this a good game or bad game? And I feel like if they had just screwed up one more thing, it would have been a bad game, no matter what. Like, the things I think they did good were mechanics. Definitely. The shooting in that game is probably some of the best shooting in any game.
Yeah.
It just feels good. Every gun feels a little bit different. You can viscerally experience like the changes in the stats and the different effects.
They work out a really good balance as well between doing things like having guns that are good or bad guns and having characters that have good or bad skills. So I've explained this really badly, but like you can be good at the game if you're good at other shooters, but even if you're a modest shooter player, getting a great gun will improve your performance because of the benefits of having better loot, you know?
Right. And like another thing is they do really well with like making the shooting fun. Because especially when you get like military shooters, it's kind of at this point everyone knows like just shoot them in the head.
Right.
And in this game, while that works for the Fallen, and I think it works for the
Cabal.
the Hive. But
Cabal, it sort of
it
works.
doesn't work. Huh?
Cabal, it sort of works if you can get to the head.
Cabal, it sort of works. But I say the Vex and the Cabal, you kind of have to approach them differently.
Right.
Because like the Vex, their weak spots are like in their stomachs usually.
Which is great because they're not real heads. You know, it's such a
right.
It's conceptually good.
And actually, some of them it punishes you for going for the headshot because if you blast off their head, then they become like rampaging things that can't see, and they start shooting wildly, and they become like insane.
But they can still operate without the heads because they don't need their heads.
Right.
You know, it's yeah, they're great.
But then you also have stuff like the hobgoblins, where if you don't get that shot off that immediately kills them, they do that like shield thing,
right?
Where they hunker down and become invincible for a little bit. And then with the Cabal, it's all about maneuvering around them because they have the Centurions with the shields, so you have to kind of get around the shields and hit them there. They got like the Scions that bounce around a little bit, and you can't get close to them. If you get close to a Scion, they destroy you because they have that really powerful melee hit.
Right, and there's things like you can get a really great gun and plow damage through anything, but there's always an opportunity to employ strategy, like with the different types of shields versus the different types of weapons.
Right, and like you run into things like I can never remember the name of this enemy, but it's a Vex enemy that has a giant shield in front of it, but that it slowly rotates around it.
Right. Yeah, they're like big harpies.
Right. And the funny thing is like if you stop and think about that, like conceptually, it's like why does this thing have a shield that slowly moves around it? But in the moment, you just don't care. You just want to get around the shield and kill it. So that they got the shooting down and enemy variety perfect. I mean, let's be fair, these are Halo guys, and Halo does this well too. Especially when you get into moments where they mix it up, where you have both Vex and the Fallen, and they operate way differently because like the Vex, like I said, they have a different weak point, but the weapons are also way different. The Vex are all very straight on shots that move very quickly,
right?
Or like the purple bombs. The Fallen, on the other hand, they have all those weapons where the bullets move slowly, but curve around cover. You know. So
I would say this. Sorry, carry on.
What I'm saying is that, like, when they mix up the enemies like that, it really forces you to approach a combat differently every time.
I would say with the different subclasses, that carries across to PvP as well. You have to tackle very different classes of people quite often. Different classes of other players. No, I agree. I think enemy variety is the big advantage. There are some things... It's a very unusual game. Like, I think Taken King really basically fixes most of the problems. I think if it had come out in the same style and with all the refinements of Taken King, it'd be a very different story. But
right.
But it has a lot of weird weaknesses that... Like, there are areas where you can see that in some senses it was rushed, and then there are other places where you can see that someone was attached to something and wouldn't let go. Like, not having matchmaking for raids.
Mm-hmm.
They've said that they did that because they wanted people to get to know people and encourage that MMO thing. And while I get that, it should have been really obvious in playtesting that didn't work. Like that.
Like that works in MMOs because there's much more of an investment, I feel like, in MMOs, not only of time, but a lot of times money too.
And in an MMO, the social area, the kind of stuff you have in the social area or in Destiny, is always through the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna walk around in the towns a lot more and meet people.
So yeah, like, so what, to kind of finish up what I was saying is that the other things I think Destiny does really well is I think the aesthetic is great. There's a very specific look to the game that I think is really, really great. You have the mixture of all these beautiful landscapes and very, very science fiction-y buildings and structures, but you're also in this state of ruin in all of them.
Right. My favorite thing in the game is to go to places that look like all the buildings on Mars that just look like airports.
Mm-hmm.
Modern day airports.
My favorite is Venus. When you go to like the old academy and you see like these big courtyards and things like that. And I think, unfortunately, they only utilize it for one mission. But I think one of the most beautiful landscapes they have is the Black Garden.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And so it has that look about it that's really, really cool, and it's unique to Destiny. I can honestly say that there's not any other... It doesn't feel derivative of anything else to me.
No, I totally agree. And this is a game that, like, the game itself often feels very derivative of Halo, but never visually.
Right.
The thing that reminds me the most of Halo is the enemies. They are the Halo enemy types.
Yeah.
No, I've really been getting into it. I think I've never played it in its original form, because even when you just play it without any DLC, you are still playing Taken King Destiny these days, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But even without that, you can kind of see from the vanilla that a lot of the criticisms that came out originally were valid. But I am kind of glad they managed to save it, because it's very satisfying, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if they would have just screwed up, like I said, if they would have just screwed up one other thing, if the shooting didn't feel good, or if the look was just boring, or, you know, just all those like little tiny things you don't really take into consideration much when you talk about a game in a real general sense. Destiny at this point is definitely a game that the sum is greater than its parts.
Yeah,
right?
It's saved by the fact that it feels good.
Yeah.
But now with Taken King, Rise of Iron, and stuff, I think it is good story-wise. I think the content is good. And, you know, vanilla is not sparse on content. For all people say about it not having much of a story, it's not a short game.
No, it's... Okay, here's the thing with vanilla, because I played vanilla before there's any DLC. It's not necessarily a short game, but because of because of how they decide to do the story, or lack thereof, you never get a sense of actual progression.
It's true.
Going through that original story, you're just kind
Right.
of doing mission after mission after mission, and you sit there and you constantly wait for it to start to come together, and then it doesn't.
Right,
You're
like
just done.
A very common feeling is you're going to a new planet and you think, oh, we're cooking now. And then after your first mission on the planet, you're fighting someone new, and you feel like a new story began without the other one really ending. And you're like, is something happening?
What's
No, I
happening?
agree. Like, the thing that feels most like a plot to me is the lead into Dark Below, when you see Eris on the station, because she's a unique character and she gives you a mission.
Mm-hmm.
And you go and you do it and you get that sword for a short time and you fight it. That's such... It's just a tease for the DLC, and it's the mission that feels the most like you're actually getting into a story in it. And the DLC doesn't really fix that, because it doesn't address any of the vanilla story stuff at all, really. It pretty much just picks up new story, and each story in the DLC is self-contained and complete, really. So I kind of like that.
It's definitely a different thing, because I too am now playing through the DLC, and as a kind of a teaser, everyone, I've been recording myself playing them, and as soon
wrong one.
as
Sorry.
I'm getting to that. Right. I just today finished the House of Wolves DLC, mistakenly thinking it was the first DLC, and I did that, and it was funny playing through that, because I think you mentioned on one of your streams is that House of Wolves is definitely a product of a different mindset when it came to Destiny by the developers.
Yeah.
It was clearly that thing was in production before they released Destiny, so it has a lot of the same sort of tropes as vanilla Destiny, because they thought that this was what they were going to be doing. Like, this was it, and I think it was after they released House of Wolves I was like, okay, we got to change things, guys. We got to do something here.
Dark Below, right off the bat, is obviously, it came before. Dark Below could be vanilla Destiny. There is nothing different to that at all. House of Wolves, I think you can start to see some attempt to put corrections in.
Right. Well, the thing that made me laugh is there were corrections made, for sure. I think there's only one mission where they have you hack something.
Yeah.
But they make you do it 3 times.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they did really well with changing things, and they added things into the actual missions that did not exist in anywhere else but raids, and that's what I thought was really unique. Because there's a mission where you have to do platforming, and then there's a mission where you actually go into parts of the Vault of Glass, and you interact with things that you would when you do Vault of Glass.
Yeah.
And which I thought was really neat. But there were still things that they still hadn't quite nailed yet, and one of them was, my God, we do not know how to tell coherent stories, because
right off the bat they try to make it better, because they do give you a character who talks to you a lot more often to tell you what you're doing.
Right.
But what she tells you is pretty much incoherent, I think.
Right, and that was the thing that I kind of running into, because they're like, oh, you gotta take down the Silent Fang. The who? Who the fuck are these guys? And they're like, oh, they're the horrible assassins from the Reef War. What the fuck's the Reef War?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, he's the Kell of Kells. Like, okay, great. Where's the Keenan of Keenans? Just
but the thing is, if you can get into the story, it's kind of interesting. He's this leader of the Fallen who thinks that he sees himself as a messiah figure who's going to unite the clans.
Mm-hmm. But they themselves hate him.
Yeah. Um,
And it's funny because I was playing through House of Wolves right now, so it's all very fresh in my mind. He is easily the most fuck up of all villains of
right,
all
he gets
time.
nothing
Like,
right. You beat him every
No.
level. Every level you're sent to fight him, you beat him, and every level seems to begin with, "Well, he's changed his plan again," because
Yeah. It's like he goes back home, and there's like one little drag who's like, "Oh, what are we going to do tonight, Skolos? Same thing we do every night, drag. Try to take over the Kells." You know? And he's like so fucking incompetent that by the end of it, when I actually fight him, and he's all like, "Bah," and then I'm like, "Okay." And I basically stood still. I'm like, like I don't even want to run from you. I feel legitimately bad if I have to run from you now. Like,
it's funny because I wish you'd played Dark Below, like, because Dark Below is really funny. Because Dark Below, clearly the philosophy when they do that is, they go, well, everyone who's played this has probably finished main Destiny, right? So the first mission should have a stupidly tough enemy just in there. Not a boss. Just an enemy in that level
Right.
who's ridiculously difficult. And he kicked my ass repeatedly. And then House of Wolves, I defeated him by accident. The Kell of Kells. Well, obviously I was trying to kill him, but I hit him with my rocket launcher a few times, and then I ran around to the other side. And then I ran around back. And then he stopped chasing after me, and it said mission over, and I was like, wait, did he die? He killed, I died once on it, and what killed me was not him, but those servitors that appear either side.
oh, they almost killed me too because it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize that they are invincible.
Right.
Because I'm shooting the hell out of them. I'm like, why are these things dying? But I wasn't noticing the whole immune thing that keeps flying off of them every time I shot them.
So what did you think of House of Wolves overall? The mission that got me
I
more than... Sorry, no, answer my question first, then I'll talk. That's how this conversation works.
usually, you throw the ball, I grab it, I throw it back. I liked it. I actually really, really enjoyed it. Mostly because of the mission structure, and the stuff that they made you do in the missions. I appreciated. Like I said, I wasn't really sold on the narrative that they were presenting for this bit, and honestly, towards the end, that Petra girl was really annoying me.
I feel like apparently the
Because-
first time in House of Wolves you didn't have to keep going back to her, but then in Taken King they added this quest structure that they added retrospectively to a lot of missions.
Right. Like going back to her didn't bother me. It was the things that she would say when you'd get back, where she's like, "Oh man, the hunt's coming to an end soon. Makes me sad. I love field work." I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? You've been here the whole time talking to me over comms.
Right.
You ain't doing shit. Like, you ain't down here. In fact, the one mission where you could have done something, your comms got all jacked up because of a servitor, but the other asshole who's only 10 feet away from you, he can talk to me just fine. Just move over. Just walk over to him. He's 20 feet away. just walk over there.
I will
My
say,
God.
I liked him as a character much more interesting than her. I'd have
he was cool.
liked to spend more time with the Fallen. What was he? House Judgment Varix. I thought he was great.
Yeah.
The idea that, I know it sounds stupid, but and you do cover this in the Grimoire cards, but this is exactly the problem with Destiny, right? Yes, it's covered in the Grimoire cards, but you could go through most of Destiny thinking the Fallen were basically like mindless animals,
Right.
Kind of until you meet Varix. I know they've got guns and shit, but it's science fiction. You can give beast. We've all seen Klingons.
Yeah, you can give a bear a pistol.
Right. The right to bear arms.
Armed bears.
So, like, wouldn't it be cool if that came up more often? Or a mission with the
Right, yeah,
Cabal, where you saw the Cabal. Like there's I'm not going to get into it too much, but there's a mission in Taken King. In Taken King, without going into too much detail, the Cabal actually kind of play a big point in that plot, because they're at war with the enemy in that expansion as well. And you learn more about the Cabal as a culture, as a species, as a psychological profile of them than you do in the vanilla game in that expansion. And you don't see that many characters, but just their actions in it are interesting. And I'd like a little bit more of that.
That's kind of the problem that I think Destiny had going into this, especially the Bungie team, because they got away with something in the Halo games. Because if you really think hard about the Halo games, the enemies you're fighting kind of do the same thing. It's all these different races, but you don't ever really know a ton about those races because they're all just the Covenant. And they try to pull off the same trick in Destiny by calling them all the Darkness.
But they're not affiliated.
But that's the problem. They don't work together. They actually, in fact, if you come across an area where both of them are present, they are fighting each other.
In many respects, Halo actually, and this is why it's actually such a small change, but if you actually think about the Halo games, their storytelling is not that much more in depth than Destiny's is. It's mostly a voice over a comm that tells you where to go and fills you in on stuff like, oh, they've done this with this, and it's words you don't understand. It's like Star Trek, right? Like 90% of every Star Trek episode are actors saying things that try to communicate a concept to the viewer, even though the viewer doesn't understand any of the words being said, you know? Like, oh, I'm gonna load the thing and demagnetize the couplings on the... You don't know what they're doing, you know?
It's just jargon.
Right, yeah. But you get a sense of, they have got us trapped in a thing, and if we do a thing, we can escape the thing. That's what most of Halo is.
And what the problem with that is that like Halo does that, and they get away with it for two reasons, right? One, they actually have a much better supporting cast,
right?
Because I mean, Master Chief doesn't really fucking talk.
No,
but Cortana is legitimately interesting. She's interesting to listen to. The Sergeant.
Yeah, there's nobody in Destiny of Cortana's level.
Right. And they tried. The Ghost was supposed to be, but you never got a chance to hear Dinklebot. Oh my god. Like, I feel so bad for Peter Dinklage, because that was the worst fucking performance that he has ever done.
Right, like, the word is they originally wanted him to do...
I imagine it was direction.
The word is they wanted him to do a lot more, but he couldn't fit it in his schedule. So maybe that's why Destiny ended up so short of story.
But there's also issues with it being, his performance being very unemotional, which to me I take as it was a direction, like he was told
you're a robot.
Stoic. Right. And people did not respond to that.
No. And the thing is, Peter Dinklage is too good an actor to really think that it has to really believe that it's entirely his fault.
Mm-hmm. The other reason I think Halo gets away with things is that, now I'm sorry Halo fans out there, Halo has a very shallow mythology.
Yeah.
It's very much like Star Wars. Unless you start getting to the extended universe shit, like the actual mythology that's presented in the main chunks of, or main bits of media, is shallow. And you see that in Halo, where it's basically, okay, you had the Forerunners, they built these giant circles in space that kill shit, they killed these giant space bugs. Hey, there's this big coalition of aliens that really don't fucking like you. They're at war. Kill them. See, that's the basics.
I would agree. I think Halo also gets by on the fact that it's not as far in the future, so you've instantly got this grounding of, okay, this is basically the present-day human military, and they're at war. And we don't know how... The fact that it's just the present-day military gets you off to another start. And I think the problem with Destiny is its mythology is actually... Like, the Grimoire cards are very in-depth and they're very good, but its mythology isn't that much deeper than Halo's, or at least it wasn't really supposed to be, but it sounded like it was, so you feel like you're actually missing more than you are.
Right, and that's where I was going with it. Is that the way they present it in Destiny is that so much has happened since the Traveler and since the darkness showed up that there's just libraries upon libraries upon libraries of these tales and these stories and what happened and how did we get to this point, and tales of heroics that saved the day, and all these inner workings between the Cabal and the Fallen and the Hive and the Vex, and there's all this just stuff that they trick you into believing exists, but when you don't get it, you don't get that payoff. You don't ever get that you don't get that access to that deep vein of lore that they keep insisting exists.
And partly that's on them, because very often they'll write things that invite questions, but then when you look into it, you realize don't have answers. Like, again, I don't want to spoil the DLC too much for you, but it's in the trailer, so I'll do it. But in Rise of Iron, the Rise of Iron is about the Iron Lords, right? And the Iron Lords, they say, come from before there were Guardians, right? Before there were Guardians, during the Fall, the Iron Lords were established, right? So, the fundamental question that makes me ask is, okay, then in what way is an Iron Lord different to a Guardian, right? And yet when you see the Iron Lords, they have armor, and they have their mythology, their language, but they are people with suits of armor and the same equipment as you, and powers provided by the Traveler and ghosts. And at the end, you get... you can be inducted into the ranks, right? So...
Right.
There is no difference. Like, they are...
Like...
heroes chosen by the Traveler. And so what does that dialogue mean? And ultimately, what it makes you think is that it means a specific thing, but in practical terms, it doesn't mean anything. You know? They aren't different from Guardians, functionally.
So Org Chaos says in the chat, in Halo 2 and 3, they started showing the Covenant as a hierarchy of different races, but in the first one, it wasn't quite elaborated on. True.
Right, well, they hadn't introduced they hadn't introduced the leaders in the first one, had they? They were introduced in 2, I think. I forget what they were called.
They didn't really touch on like how the Brutes were a different group altogether, and
what were the leaders called? The ones with the long necks. I can never remember what they were called.
I can't remember what they're called either. But he goes on to say, he says, well, but the first Halo game, Reach had already fallen in their lore. So, what I think, trying to say is that, Halo has its deep lore too. And I do agree, to a sense, that there, contained within that property, there is a lot of stories to be told. The difference is, like Owen said, is we're talking about time here. The events of Halo happen, what is it, within 200 to 300 years from today. When we talk about Destiny, I think they talk about it being like almost 1,000 years.
It certainly feels further. Destiny's got a very odd aesthetic.
Even by like language, like if you just listen to like how they talk, it's way different. Like if you listen to how Halo characters talk to each other, it's still very familiar to us. They use military terms that we've heard before.
Right. That's always been my idea. That's your grounding with Halo. I mean, if you look at what Halo really is, Halo is the modern human race versus the Guardians, because the Covenant are like the Guardians from Destiny.
Right.
Technology taken to an almost religious level. Which is what the Guardians are.
Right. Oh, and then you just said the Lords or the Iron Lords, right? That term right there suggests that Destiny takes place in a time that is so far removed from our own that they use terms like that. They the idea of iron, this element from the ground, having some sort of honorable properties to it, worthy enough to be used.
See, the interesting the interesting thing to me about Destiny's lore is, and this is why I really like that game theory video and the people who've delved into the evil traveler idea. If you look at Destiny, the formation of this almost, because they are almost religious, like their devotion to the traveler is religious. The Guardians are a religious order in a way, right? If you look at that, it's a very recent phenomenon. Well, it's not very recent, but it's recent even since the arrival of the traveler, because the cutscene at the beginning says, we found the traveler on Mars, right? And he gives us what they only call light, but we assume it's technology, right? Or some technologizing force that makes us more powerful, and we call it light.
And ushers in like this golden era of
right,
humanity.
and that's when we colonize the Moon, Mars, and Venus. And when you see Mars and Venus, this is the interesting thing to me. Mars and Venus are clearly human civilizations, but they don't look like the tower.
Right.
They don't have that quasi-religious look to it. Mars looks like an airport. Venus looks like an academy. The moon looks like
research facilities.
Research, right? Like, exactly. Whenever you see
bases,
whenever you see one of the places that we've abandoned after the Golden Age, it looks like a present-day image of the future, right?
Well, and then you gotta look at they have the Awoken, right? These are humans who have existed so long away from Earth that they have changed, like, physically. Like, their skin is a different color. They have evolved and adapted to exist somewhere other than Earth.
Right.
You know? So we're talking a very long time, that were removed. And I think that's something that actually is a benefit of Destiny. It makes it more interesting to me. But
what really
if you
interests...
can't express that enough, it falls apart.
What really interests me, and this is something I find that Destiny works if you're some people can't, some people aren't interested, but if you're the kind of person who can take an interest in an environment as a narrative tool, there's a lot in Destiny for that. You know what I mean? If you can just be like, what does this room mean for the story, you know? But I get that it still suffers from not having the story very present, but I'm curious what you think of the evil traveler theory.
I think it's actually really, really interesting. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to it yet, because there is this idea of the darkness that's been chasing it, right?
I should say, evil traveler theory I would also use to encompass the idea that the traveler is not necessarily evil, but isn't what he seems, you know?
Right. I think it's much more plausible that the traveler is kind of just a the word I keep on wanting to say is asexual, but just doesn't have an affiliation. Right. Doesn't have like a goal. It's just there. And but no, I actually really like it because when you play Destiny, when you first start playing it, they purposely put you in a position where you're awoken mid-fight, right. Like this, like what the shit that's been going on has been going on for a very, very, very long time, and throughout the game, what you essentially embark on is, at times, I mean, there's definitely times where it's like, okay, they're clearly making actions against us.
Right.
But there are other times where it's just, hey, they're doing something over here. We're not sure what it is. Go kill everyone.
So, the reason the evil traveler theory... Sorry, I thought you were finished. No, carry on.
I am not. So you have that, and then like Owen said, you have this very religious feel to it, and in every other game, just about every other game, the religious zealot is almost always a bad guy, right? There's I think there's very few examples out there of a religious fueled or a protagonist fueled by religion that is the good guy, right?
Right.
It's almost always the bad guy. So you got that going for it. And then two, they do sprinkle little hints going about. One of the things I think is really interesting is Rasputin, right? Rasputin is one of the most fascinating concepts in that game to me.
Very underdeveloped,
and for those of you who don't
though.
know, it is underdeveloped, but it's to me, I almost prefer it that way because they leave it hanging.
I agree.
That you're just like, what the hell is going on with this thing? For those of you who don't know, Rasputin in the game is a artificial intelligence that they call a war mind. Apparently, it was one of multiple AIs that the Russians had developed to help combat the darkness when the darkness first started to show up. And you rediscover this one, and what's interesting to me about it is it's not necessarily on your side.
Right.
You use it a few times, but it also acts kind of on its own. And some of the things it does can kind of be interpreted as self-serving and anti-you. And what to me that kind of signifies is that Rasputin as an AI represents a humanity that was still devoted to science. It was utilizing the Traveler for science, to build new technologies, to further the people for themselves.
Right.
But the point that you're at now, humanity no longer is concerned about progressing forward as people. They are almost 100% devoted to preserving the Traveler and hanging on to this religious symbol of theirs.
Okay.
They've
that
abandoned.
ties in.
They've abandoned.
That ties in very
What's that?
nicely with what I want to say. But
Okay.
I'm gonna let you finish.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the reason I find myself drawn to the evil traveler theory, which is essentially the theory that what the Traveler wants is not necessarily what humanity wants, right? The reason I'm so drawn to the theory is, if you actually play Destiny with an eye to trying to figure out where humanity's at right now, the human race is extinct. Really. You still there? Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry,
You make a really good point because you come back from the dead.
You come back from the dead. Now, they do say that the tower is over the last human city, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's protected by the Traveler's light. And when you go to the edge of the tower, you can see the city. You can look down and
Right.
and see it. But you can never go there. And it looks pretty active, but no missions are set there. Fair enough, if it's under the Traveler's protection, you're not needed.
Mm.
But you never see a human in the entire game that isn't a Guardian. You never see any evidence of a place where, aside from those lights in the distance below you, you never see any evidence of a place where humanity's thriving. The only people you see are the Guardians and the people who are working to protect the Traveler. Aside from Cade, the Hunter's mentor, you also never see people who, and he's an exo, you never see people who behave like humans. You never see people who have goals beyond utmost devotion to the Traveler, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that the Traveler is here to protect humanity he's not doing anything like, well, none of your missions are like, well, go to the outskirts of the city and establish a new camp so we can make the city bigger and people can live there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's always go to Mars and stop someone who's trying to hurt the Traveler, you know? And so humanity seems to be at this stage kind of dead, you know? So even if you don't go into the grimoire cards... Sorry, yeah, carry on.
See, I think I'm going to poke a couple holes into that real quick.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have been able to do that a month ago. But if you watch the trailer now for Destiny 2, you do see more of the city, and you do see what appears to be more normal-looking people. They're not Guardians.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. But yeah. I also, not to get too much into the grimoire stuff, because I don't think you need it to make a good Traveler case, but that grimoire card that reveals that the Fallen used to have access to the Traveler, I think is probably the best argument for the case, you know? I think it makes a good case that the Traveler visits people and then moves on. Mm-hmm. And if it was revealed that
maybe it's possible that they have stuck around on Earth longer than it has before, and maybe it's because it found someone to worship it.
Right, or even the idea that the Traveler's natural cycle is to stay for a few thousand years and then to leave. Mm-hmm. And it thinks it's doing a good thing, but it's actually just turning all its worshippers into dependent monsters is interesting, I think.
Because that's like one of the stories behind the new bad guys are going to be in Diablo 2, the Red Legion, which are Cabal, but they're a different faction, and led by someone who is legitimately pissed that the Traveler did not choose them. It passed over them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting ones. And then, of course, there's the Vex, who seem unconcerned by the Traveler and uninterested. Yeah, the races are cool. We have a couple of questions. Let's see. Blanche says, "How are you two guys?" How are we, John? I'm pretty good. I'm having a good day.
I'm doing all right, except for my knee killing me.
And the reason I dropped in questions was we actually have a Destiny-related one. And Blanche says, really? "Hey guys, what exactly is the grimoire?" In the real world,
grimoire is a mistake.
In the real world, the grimoire is Destiny's story for the most part. As you go through the game, you earn. It's kind of like, it's almost like your Vanguard reputation. It just builds up over time, and every time you earn a certain amount, you get a card, right? For the most part,
right.
And then when you kill certain things, you get a card.
They're locked behind tasks. Like, you have to kill X amount of Vex with this type of weapon, and then you get this card.
They're like achievements a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
But you got lots of them.
And basically they are bits of the story. Or not just the main story, but of the world that you exist, or the universe that you exist in.
They're actually...
they'll tell you little things.
They're actually very good. Like, I have total agreement with the people who say that the Grimoire card should not have been the whole story. But I also feel some sympathy for the people who are sad that Destiny 2 is getting rid of them completely.
There is an interesting aspect to them, and it's... What makes them interesting is when you decide to sit down and start reading through them, there's a lot of, like, oh moments.
Right.
Which is kind of a cool feeling. But
you have to read them on a separate website and app as well, which is...
Yeah, and that's a problem. My issue with them is now, I don't want to start this argument again, but I think the Grimoire cards are very akin to item descriptions in the Dark Souls games. They are bits of the lore hidden away that require you to jump through an obstacle to read them, and even when you read them, they don't tell you the things that you might want to know.
So I was reading a little bit about this.
or they tell you in a way that still leaves questions.
I was reading a little bit about
this. It's a little
this,
frustrating to me.
and apparently, very late in Destiny's development, it came down from Activision that if this was going to be essentially an MMO, I know they tried very hard not to call it one, but if that's what it was going to be, then the missions needed to be completable in whatever order you liked, which is weird because that's not really how the game plays out, but you needed to be able to complete the missions in any order over and over again, right?
And that's not how MMOs work either.
No, it's really weird, but apparently that came down from above very late in the game, and the lead writer actually left. And so, from what I understand, they ended up in a position where they had to restructure how the story was going to be told in the game and finish the game. And what happened is the story basically ended up... They couldn't put the story in the time they had left in a way that would work with being able to do the missions over and over again in any order the way the execs wanted, right? And so the solution they came up with was to strip the story entirely. And then what they did was they basically took all the background world building they'd been doing, because you do a lot of writing like that in the development of a game, you know.
Yeah.
To take
you read
that,
the Bible
and just turn that into grimoire cards, which, so it's not even necessarily intentional, I guess, but it's a difficult situation to overcome. And it's odd because what they ended up with the situation is some people really love the grimoire cards. I like them. I think they're good.
So do I. I do like them in the terms of of world building and extra. You know, I like the idea of it being extra. What I don't like about it is that because it is almost it is basically the only story in Destiny at first, especially in vanilla. It's not a good replacement for an actual plot.
Right. Yeah, and it's a real shame. See, I think it's sad. The reason I'm sad they're getting rid of the grimoire cards completely is the ideal solution for me would be grimoire cards and a little bit more story. Not a lot, just a little bit.
See, my thing is, like, I think you can have a much more epic story and still have the grimoire cards, because when you look at the grimoire cards, they very rarely have anything to do with what you're doing.
No, they're always old legends, and they feel like it feels like reading a Bible, and I don't mean Bible in the sense you used it a minute ago. I mean like holy book. Like they're very often parables and mythology.
And so it's like, I feel like you can have a very concise plot, and you know, I hate to use the term traditional because for some reason that it's kind of a negative connotation these days. But you can have a traditional video game story presented in the traditional way and still have the grimoire cards. You know, they're not dependent on each other.
Well, it's like this whole thing about the evil traveler theory mostly comes from the grimoire cards. I would never have expected them to put it in the main plot, you know?
Right.
I think Destiny 2 is going to be interesting. I think in all probability it will fix most of the problems people have. I just hope it doesn't lose something special in the process. But
right, because you do run the risk of, from what they've said, that it is going to be more story content, more cinematics and things like that. What you risk when you do that, though, is you risk... Destiny has this really great feel to it about you're not the chosen one.
Right.
You're a member of an army, essentially, a group of warriors, and you are tasked with doing what needs to be done to protect the city and the traveler. your holy paladins, you know,
Right.
and you, but you're essentially you're nameless, you're faceless. You have a duty, and you accomplish your duty, or you fail. What you run the risk of when you start adding a much bigger story is suddenly your character becomes much more of a focus.
Right.
And the sense that only your character can be doing these things. That somehow you're special. And which is fine for a power fantasy, but it does harm the idea of being just a moving part of the mythos and not the focus.
Yeah, I think that works. I agree. I'm really curious as to how Destiny 2 is gonna turn out. It's like a totally different game, but that's what I liked about. Do you remember DC Universe Online, where the idea was
Yes.
everyone has been like almost everyone on Earth's been given superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great setup for a superhero MMO. I thought, you know, and you didn't feel like you were like Batman. You felt like you were one of a group of a new, very large Justice League, and I like that.
Yeah.
That was a good game at times.
Mm-hmm. There is something to be said, especially when you're playing video games, about being the character that's shuffled into the background. It's why, completely jumping ship. It's why the first in Call of Duty 4, right? It's why the scene where your playable character, when he dies, is so impactful, because you're led to believe that, okay, well, I'm the super soldier of the story. I'm going to go run around, kill terrorists and brown people, and I will save the day. I'll save freedom and democracy and stop World War III. And they just shift you over to a different character. It hits you because you realize, oh no, I'm just a nameless soldier, essentially. And I can be wiped out just like anyone else.
It's like, did you ever play Zombie U?
No, but I know what you're going to talk about. About every time you die, you come back as a different character, and you can actually run into your old character.
As a zombie. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a nice touch. I totally broke the continuity here and there, but it was a nice touch. What's like, did you hear this thing that came out recently about Prey 2?
No, what's that?
So there was going to be Prey's just come out, and it's just called Prey.
Mm-hmm.
But it is Prey 2. Well, there was a version of Prey 2 before this that got cancelled. You remember that?
Right.
And
I
was
remember
the
the whole bounty thing.
Right, and I was kind of interested in this because I actually liked the first Prey. Not many people did, but I thought it was okay.
I did. I liked it. It's too long, but...
Yeah, and the weird thing about Prey is it's kind of better before most of the gimmicks get introduced, but...
Right.
but it was okay, and I was kind of interested. They announced today they released recently information about what they had in mind for the ending to Prey 2 was, and they were going to have this mechanic where every time you die, because it was going to be an open world game, you were a human character who's been transported to this alien planet where you're working as a bounty hunter. Every time you die, you wake up again in your apartment, and you are trying to rescue the character from the first film, Tommy, who's also on the planet, right?
Okay.
But he has only ever contacted you in spirit form because he's in this impenetrable prison, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you get there and you track him down, you get to these series of ever-escalating obstacles where it's getting harder and harder and harder to pass them, and eventually you get to a room that's just full of hundreds upon hundreds of your own dead bodies. And it turns out that every time you've died in-game, your character has actually died and a new clone has been produced back at your apartment with the memories intact. And Tommy's actually tried to get you to rescue him 100s of times, and every time this is as far as you've got. So the room's just full of your bodies, which I thought was a pretty cool concept. And then they were saying that at the end of the game, you actually manage to get home. You have a teleporter, and you type in random coordinates, and it takes you all the way to home, where a final cutscene shows you having a family and retiring, and then, eventually passing away peacefully in your sleep, and then waking up again in your apartment on the alien planet, the same age as a clone. And that was how they were going to let you, after the story was done, get back into the city to complete all your your wrap-up collectibles.
So, okay. Any more on Destiny?
No, I'm done with Destiny, sorry.
Okay, so I did want to bring up one more thing before we wrap up here.
Yeah, we'll keep it short today.
So I saw that you had made a comment on Facebook. And I was like, oh, really? I didn't know they were making a Far Cry 5. And I looked it up.
Do we have to?
Yeah, like, that is a ballsy move. That is a ballsy move on Ubisoft's part.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, they're making a new Far Cry, and the other Far Cries that we've had so far, or since they've kind of restarted the series
with 3, really,
with
that's
3.
Yeah.
You were in like this remote jungle island, filled with pirates, and then you were in, was it like Tibet or Cadotte? Yeah, Cadotte, I think, which is under this totalitarian regime.
I never played any of those ones though. I do keep meaning to get to 4 and Primal. I've heard they're good.
Yeah, and then you have Primal, which is cavemen. You're playing as Neanderthals essentially. And
same map as Far Cry 4 though, just with the heights adjusted,
right?
Randomized apparently.
Yeah,
which I always thought was kind of funny.
Well, it came out really quick, so it had to be something like that.
Right. I hear it's good though.
Yeah, a lot of people like it. So Far Cry 5 comes out, and the location they've decided is the remote, uncivilized fields of Montana, United States. And the villain is essentially a alt-right, or I should just say right-wing supremacist group.
Ultra-Christian, I think I read.
Huh?
I said ultra-Christian, I think I read.
Are they? Because I didn't get to that bit, because one of your partners that teams up with you is actually the old pastor from the church that this group has rolled in, has basically stolen your flock from
I know that definitely supposed to be religious extremists.
Right. It's a cult. It's a cult with a militia aspect to them. And which is a really unique thing. Not unique, but it's a very interesting thing, especially in this climate.
It's an interesting choice, certainly.
And one of the most interesting things that's happened already is how quickly the tide has turned on things. To kind of avoid getting into like maybe some more controversial things, it's essentially made the groups of people who have spent the last 8 years or so calling everyone who's been upset about something snowflakes and libtards and the Gamergate group, these people who have been very vile people on the internet, are now on the other side of things. They are now in a position where that a cartoonish version of their ideals is now being presented as a villain, and they're not taking it well.
My favorite thing is I always like it when you show like gun-toting right-wing they're terrorists basically,
Right.
and they're saying, "How dare you make us the villains in a game?" And well, like, that's not you,
Right, or Chaos just said this, like, oh, how dare they attack my point of view and religion.
It's
But yeah,
I think it's very funny because the one thing that has been the chant of Gamergate has been, if you don't like it, don't buy it. And I have some sympathy with that point of view. I just think that you get to talk about why you're not buying it. You know what I mean? That's, if you want to say, I'm not buying it and I don't think you should buy it either, you can. You're allowed to do that. But whereas if you don't like it, don't buy it now. Where's that gone? What, are we not doing that anymore? We moved on from if you don't like it, don't buy it now? So funny.
I think they're just upset that the villain isn't. The villains aren't just a radical group of unethical journalists.
That would be great.
No, it's really really kind of interesting. Will I play it? Probably not. I just don't. I didn't play the other Far Cry's. It's not a type of game that super appeals to me. I mean, I've been playing this Horizon Zero Dawn, and it's kind of the same setup where you just get this big open map with a ton of shit to do, and even that's starting to kind of wear a little thin for me in Horizon. Right. And it's just I have nothing against them. It's a very viable game design these days, and I don't fault anyone for liking that kind of game. Just not for me.
Right.
So
in their defense, this is what Far Cry's always done. You know, it's no change. You know, they're very established it.
What kind of makes me curious is I want to hear how they explain
that this is different.
Well, I want to hear them how they explain. I want to hear the story explanations of why hasn't like the U.S. military just moved in, to why isn't there any sort of like media outcry about this town that's been completely taken over, or this county that's been taken over by religious fascism? I mean, because to give you just a real quick history of how the United States has handled religious cults in the past, we just kill them. Like,
right.
Like Waco and what was the other one? There was another one where they basically stormed a religious compound, and
funnily enough, that came up in the plot of an episode of Kimmy Schmidt the other day. Funnily enough.
But it's so I'm curious how they explain why that isn't happening. And I know some people go like, oh, what about the guys who stormed and took over the nature preserve in Oregon? Yeah, they did that, and nothing really bad happened to them. But they also didn't like kill anybody. They weren't.
It's funny though, because this is an area, like, I'm sure that Fox News is going to pick up on this at some point. And this is an area where Ubisoft has had trouble with this before, because it's important to remember Ubisoft is one of the few Western games companies making big names that isn't American.
Right.
There are a few British game development studios, but
French? Are they French?
Ubisoft are French, and so, and you know, I don't know if this is a secret, but the French don't like the Americans that much. Is that known?
Does the French really like anyone all that much?
Right. But they did. But they generally have been fairly favorable. They did Assassin's Creed 3, which, when Assassin's Creed 3 was being teased, everyone was saying, oh, it's going to be really flag-wavy and pro-America. Because I think people kind of forget sometimes that Ubisoft isn't American. And then when it came out, people were saying, no, it's not like that. It's very... Assassin's Creed 3 is really weird because on the one hand, it tries not to be very flag-wavy and American, and then on the other hand, it really, like, dives into American myth. Like, it does the Ride of Paul Revere badly.
Right.
It's like the least exciting legendary ride I've ever played. But when the DLC for...
You've done that a lot?
in every Assassin's Creed game. I saw that Assassin's Creed movie. It's so bad. We'll talk about that next week if you like, because I haven't watched it all yet. I actually turned it off in boredom.
Nice.
But
hopefully by next week, Wonder Woman.
I might not get a chance to see it. I don't know. They're all women-only screenings in my town. I'm not allowed to go. Sorry, that's the other Twitter controversy this week, isn't it?
Oh, God.
That one theater in Austin decided to have a women's-only screening, and this is apparently
the Alamo Draft. Did you see their response to it?
Yeah.
It is the funniest tweet I've ever seen. How did it go? I could look it up now if I wanted, but in response, like, we've heard the outcry about our female-only screenings, and in response, we have scheduled more female-only screenings. Really funny.
So the DLC for Assassin's Creed 3 was called The Madness of King George, or The Tyranny of King George. And it was, if you remember in Assassin's Creed 3, there's a moment where Connor offers George Washington the Apple of Eden, and he turns it down, right? And the DLC for The Tyranny of King George, they don't go into great detail about what it is, but at first they present it like a glitch in the Animus. You play Connor, who suddenly finds the entire history of everything he's done has been changed, right? History has changed, his story has been changed, everything is different. He's in this weird alternate version where after America declared independence, George Washington declares himself king and has become a tyrant, and you have to take him down, basically. And Fox News made a huge thing about that. French video company makes a video game where George Washington is a mad tyrant. But it was a fantasy, you know? Like, people in America have written novels about stuff like that. Often.
Right. And what's funny about that is, like, that's what you're going to be upset about? Like, you guys realize that, like, the French were on our side during that conflict. Like,
right. And when you get to the end of that DLC anyway, it's a vision being shown to George Washington by the Apple about what his future could be if he chooses to take ultimate power. And he sees that vision as abhorrent and declines, you know? So it comes out very pro George Washington, you know?
Yeah.
That DLC, by the way,
is the same thing about...
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, it's the same sort of uproar they made about Mass Effect when they found out you could romance.
They said it. They said it had full frontal nudity and hardcore sex in it. That it didn't.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Andromeda does. Andromeda has some very explicit sex scenes. Yeah,
because now they've realized that's what half the people who play Mass Effect play it for. And happily, you know? It's like, do you remember that controversy? Do you remember that controversy that came up when they added those skip battle mode buttons to Mass Effect?
Yeah.
And it's like to me that made total sense, right? Because there are people who will skip every cutscene in any game they play, right? Because they're only interested in the action, right? As if I'd been playing games younger as a kid, I would totally there are some games I would totally play right now with a skip battle button. Not many, but like I'd play Mass Effect for the like even if you're not, there are people out there who just won't.
Did you say you play Mass Effect for the sex?
No. There are people who play Mass Effect for the cutscenes, right? For the story. I would totally play through Mass Effect 1 and 2 with a skip battle button just to play Mass Effect 3 with my choices in. Without too much hassle, you know? Easily.
Absolutely.
But still have the chance to go through all the dialogue and all the environments.
There's people who play the Call of Duty games and never touch the campaign. They only play the multiplayer.
Right. You know. But they're not destroying the games industry. But of course the reason is that's an option that appeals to women. Therefore, it is evil.
Oh, of course. So yeah, Far Cry 5. I'm interesting to see what happens with this. And I hope in response, Ubisoft just doubles down. Um, because I think they've already come out with a pretty solid opening salvo
I
of
hope
promotional things.
I hope when it comes out, the cult is led by Trump himself, and the group of terrorists are called the Trump voters. And half the time, and you can set traps by giving them little equations they've got to work out. You know, like the bear trap will chop off their leg if they can't, do some basic arithmetic.
And the end is the villain being killed by a cascade of snowflakes.
I don't think Trump voters are stupid, by the way. I just enjoy upsetting them by implying that the game would call them stupid.
No, I'm legit interested to see how the gamer community reacts. I'm curious of how Gamergate reacts to this, and I'm curious how both right and left medias react to this.
I just want to know. I want to know what the widespread justification is going to be for how this is different to all that stuff they didn't like. I just want to know what the answer to that is going to be. But they're not going to have an answer, are they? They're just going to go, no, it's just proof they have a liberal bias. And then all the arguments about whether or not censorship is okay or criticism is censorship will go completely out of the window. And ugh.
What would be an opportunity for self-awareness and self-examination and reflection will not happen. It will be further proof of the conspiracy against white male members of the community.
Right, like, the single best response they have is to say, well, they said that offensive representations were wrong, so it's hypocrisy. I don't think it is, but that's like the closest you get to an answer. But how do you, even then, how do you... that automatically leads into a response of, yeah, but when we said it was wrong, you said it was right, so it's okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no way around it. But this is what happens when people can't separate their personal politics from objective morality.
Right. And the truth is, like, the game might be terrible. Like,
oh yeah, it might be.
It might be terrible, and there is something to be said about having a villain who is just as cartoonish, I don't say cartoonish, but over the top and poorly representative of a certain group of people, as they've been already doing for years with, like women and people of color and things like that. Just simply flipping it on its ear doesn't make it okay. But at the same time, I'm curious of what the people who have been saying that misrepresentation is okay for so long are going to say now.
Right.
Right. The ones who are perfectly okay with, a suit of armor covering a man completely, the same suit of armor, covering nipples on a woman, that being okay. I'm curious of what they will say when there's a villain who is outrageous but still represents their ideals, is presented. I'm really fascinated to hear that justification and not justification, but hear their take on it.
I'm just looking forward to the Far Cry expansion where you play Barack Obama and you're coming to take their guns away one by one.
Let's see here. I'm gonna bring up the Twitter hashtag real quick just to see if there's anything of interest here. I'll just bring up Uh, yeah, hashtag Far Cry, right? That should work.
Well, this is good radio.
Well, you can talk too while I'm doing this.
I think it's going to be good.
Let's see here. Not a whole lot actually. Oh, wait. It's actually really funny. There's a lot more complaints about it. It's like, like I'm not going to buy Far Cry 5, not because of subject matter, but because of Uplay.
No, you know what? I can get along with that.
Mm-hmm.
I can empathize that. Well, didn't take me long to find an anti-Semitic one.
Oh, okay. Lay it on.
No. It's a picture, as so much anti-Semitism usually is. Is it just me, or is anti-Semitism like becoming more popular?
I think it is, but it's been that way for a very long time. And I have look, I understand that the creators are not anti-Semitic, but I think South Park has, at least in my experience, has a lot to do with the emergence of a very casual anti-Semitism.
Right, and casual prejudice tends to give way to sincerity. It paves the road a little bit.
Because here's the idea, like, South Park is a mature-rated show. It is not intended to be watched by children, but let's be honest, children watch the shit out of that show. And like, especially when I was in high school, that was when they were really doubling down on Cartman basically being a Nazi. And it was supposed to be a joke, right? You were supposed to look at it and go, oh, that's absurd. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, what a piece of shit. But when you have arguably one of the funniest characters on the show being a Nazi, the kids watching it definitely took it a different way. And throughout high school, I heard a lot of, like, like, oh, Jew. A lot of that being thrown around as a very dismissive title, like, oh, don't be a Jew, that sort of thing.
Right.
Not realizing that is actually really kind of a fucked up thing to do. So that was very
I'm starting
common.
to think South Park is to blame for a lot more things than people realize. And I think the first seasons of South Park, they're really kind of harmless. And then when you look at the later ones, what they started... See, here's my issue with South Park. Whenever you raise a criticism of it, and people have tried to raise it with the creators, and it falls on deaf ears because the response is always, oh, it's just a comedy show, And it's just done for the laughs. Mm-hmm. But when you actually watch South Park, there's actually quite a lot of genuine, real political views in there that you can tell the creators are actually relatively enthusiastic about, right? And sometimes it's quite insightful. I think the one on alternative medicine, where the kids are dying and the adults are buying up all the alternative medicine because it's being sold by two Indian people who own the store. Therefore, it's obviously authentic. Is
and
the gag?
And they're like, dude, take that kid to a hospital.
Right.
Like,
there are times like that where it's very insightful, but like the Al Gore global warming one, where they're criticizing Al Gore and they compare global warming to this mythological man-bear pig, right? That's great, and it's funny, and it's a great gag if global warming isn't real. Mm-hmm. But if global warming is real, which, scientific consensus says it is, and you do that in a show that you also use to make other political points that you want people to think are real, at some point you have to stop and say, is this doing harm? You know? And they don't want to acknowledge that because they want to say, hey, it's just a stupid comedy show and nobody should listen to us. But that doesn't change the fact that they do.
Right. Like, the creators of South Park have long taken the position of, I think, gleeful innocence over their... Because this is a dangerous territory, right? Because on one hand, I want to be like, you know, you guys kind of have a responsibility as being the creators and producers of a very popular chunk of content, you know? like millions of people watch your show. They quote your show. They take it, they love it. There's, you know, huge fans. And in my head, it's like, maybe you guys have a responsibility to ensure that, one, the stuff that's supposed to be jokes are taken as jokes and not secretive ways to implant your philosophies on people. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, the creators should be allowed to create what they want.
I agree. I totally agree, but the issue for me is, and I like South Park. I think it's a really funny show. My issue is my favorite episodes of South Park are the ones where legitimately my favorite episodes of South Park are the ones where the kids are playing some imaginary game, because I think they're the best ones. And they're actually really good at that. That kind of kids being kids. They've got better at it over the years as well, presenting kids as real children, and I think it's a really great show when it does that. The problem is when you do a show that is sometimes comedy, sometimes so outrageous you're not supposed to believe it, sometimes political stuff you actually want people to believe, and then sometimes dumb political stuff where the target isn't clear, you can't blame people for thinking you mean some of the things you say.
Right.
And when that becomes the case, you have to hold people accountable for the things they think they mean, in some sense. Like, I think the global warming episode's really a great example, because obviously there are a couple of global warming episodes, and they all are very dismissive. It's clear, maybe they've changed their minds, but it's clear at the time they made them, they didn't believe in global warming. There's also a really, really awful... actually, this is a perfect example. There's the really awful episode on transgender issues with Mr. Garrison.
Yeah.
And then there's a recent one about transgender bathrooms that's very good on that issue. Do you know what I mean? That's very... But there's no...
Right.
They've done an episode recently that shows that they get it, right? And shows that they understand the issues with transgender bathrooms. And it's tolerant, and it's interesting, and it's open, and it's one of those that uses the Cartman character really well to make a point.
Right.
But there's no renunciation of the really bigoted Mr. Garrison episode. And there'll never come an apology for it. And there are still people using the jokes from that episode to abuse transgender people.
Right.
Like, you see it on Twitter, people actually confronting transgender people with, well, what if you identify as a dolphin, you know? Taken straight from that episode. And that's my issue. If we're not supposed to take the it would be ridiculous for someone to identify as a dolphin, it's clearly just a joke. If you're not supposed to take that seriously, why are you supposed to take the bathroom one seriously? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
At what point are we supposed to take some point from it, you know? Anyway, not to get too far into that issue.
No. Is there any final questions? Because we're going to have to start wrapping up here.
No, I think that's pretty much everything. We can pretty much get out of here. We have a couple of comments. One is a reference to Christmas Story. No little off an Annie advert to sell us Ovaltine and give us a ROT13 code for our decoder rings. But I don't remember what that was in reference to. And then OK says, people will still see what they want to see. I think there's some truth to that.
Yeah, people are always going to see what they want to see, but it makes it much easier when the creators are on board with the same thing. If the characters want you to see something, you will probably see that because you want to see what they see. You know, that's, I guess, my take on it. But anyways,
I think people see what they want to see, certainly. But no, do you know what? I'm not gonna. It takes too long to go into.
Right. So, yeah. You have been listening to Those Aren't Biscuits. I've been one of your hosts, Jonathan Cadotte. With me, as always, has been Owen Adams. Where can they find you, man?
Go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Owen Adams. Everything is on there these days.
Great. And you can find me on my blog, which is johncperson.wordpress.com. You can follow me on Twitter, which is @johncperson. And you can follow the show, which is @NotBiscuits. And you can, hopefully come to our YouTube channel, subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. All our stream recordings end up there automatically, so you can watch all our past shows that we've done live so far. And that's pretty much it. You can join our Discord, which the links are below. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.